By the way, Canada is just about the lowest payer. Also, they shouldn't be. They are just about the lowest payer in NATO, in addition to everything else. So Canada's really been taken advantage of. And if they had to pay just something modestly fair, they wouldn't be able to succeed as a country. And that's why I feel they have to become a state.
So yesterday, you had all the premiers across Canada go together and do this very weird field trip to Washington, D.C., where they spoke with the White House representative and tried to mediate all of these tariffs and this economic threat. And today, you have President Trump saying, and this is the big one, reciprocal tariffs on everyone doing counter tariffs. So yeah, that went really great. Good job, Team Canada approach. So we're going to be taking a look at that later on in this video. But to start things off, we're going to be taking a look at what's going on with the Supreme Court case against the prorogation that Justin Trudeau has seemed to illegally done, and just a weird coincidence of the fire alarm being pulled there. So that's kind of weird. Liberals melting down back a few years ago during the Freedom Convoy over carrying a Canadian flag. But hey, whoa, now it's different, because the Liberals are saying Team Canada, go Canada, let's wave Canadian flags. So that only took 3 years to sort out. Then you also have Russia, China, and America apparently all getting together and potentially going to Moscow for a massive Russian parade, which would probably be extremely iconic and also very nerve-wracking, along with a couple other things. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage y'all to like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It does really help grow the channel. Normally, I start off with American stuff, and then we look at Canadian, and this is a bit more of a jumble. So just stick with me for the entire duration of the video as much as you possibly can, because there's a lot of information in here that's embedded in different points. We're going to start off with Liberal meltdown over a Canadian flag. So this guy who we're seeing right here apparently stole a Canadian flag from a 13-year-old kid in and around maybe the convoy era or that time, and has a complete meltdown. It's pretty interesting.
Why did you steal the flag from my 13-year-old daughter?
I stole the flag from you.
No, she was carrying it.
Oh, yeah.
She was carrying it, you stole it.
I love how you have an excuse as to why you indoctrinated your... Hey. Shh. Get out of my city. Get out of my city. Get out of my fucking city.
Police! Police, please!
You're acting like children!
Police, please!
Get out of my fucking city. Hey, watch your mouth, man.
This guy stole a flag from my 13-year-old daughter.
I stole a flag from you. Stop.
You stole a flag from my 13-year-old daughter.
Oh, that's just...
This was in the past few years, I'm guessing. There's no real gauge as to when this was, but I'm assuming it's around the Freedom Convoy time, or maybe shortly after, because don't forget, Canadians used apparently the Canadian flag as a symbol of protest. It's bad. You can't trust anybody waving a Canadian flag. They're freedom convoyers. They're crazy people that are protesting. But now the Canadian flag is bringing people together, and it's a Team Canada approach. And it's just so bizarre. It's our own flag. No alterations made, nothing. It's just our freaking flag. And the liberal mentality is so weird. It's so poisonous to the mind. You talk about this woke mind virus. 3 years ago, people were ripping flags, Canadian flags, off of vehicles and taking them away from people because, how dare you wave a Canadian flag and be patriotic? But now, apparently they're selling out of Canadian flags. Super weird. So keep that in mind. Yay, Team Canada. And then you have Alex Zoltan, the amazing Zoltan, who is in Ottawa. And he has this to say. Someone has allegedly pulled the fire alarm during our lunch break at the Supreme Court Federal Court of Appeals building, where Trudeau's prorogation of Parliament is being legally challenged. Let's take a look.
So in a most bizarre and surreal case of foreshadowing, it appears as though there actually is a fire at the place where that fire hydrant with the stick was sitting, right outside the courthouse. So see if we can figure out what's going on here. So allegedly someone has pulled the fire alarm.
there's always something, to kind of give you a little bit of a leash, a little bit of a niblet for getting into the conspiracy stuff, right? Like, why? There should have been more security. There should have been, like, unless there was an actual fire, then good job. But it's just freaking weird. And speaking of weird, my previous video was about emergency powers that are planning to be used by future interim Prime Minister Mark Carney to potentially delay an election. And in case you missed that clip, I'm going to play it for you right now because it's very, very important.
And something that my government is going to do is to use all of the powers of the federal government, including the emergency powers of the federal government, to accelerate the major projects that we need in order to build this economy and take on the Americans.
Okay, now he doesn't directly say that he's planning on using emergency powers to block an election. Of course, that's a little bit more on the speculative side, but that was also backed by a theory that Brian Lilley from the Toronto Sun had previously posted in a since viral video. But now let's take a look at what another country is doing by invoking some form of emergency powers, because this is where we're getting into kind of dangerous territory. So I was actually tagged in this post here. Right here, you can see a follower of mine tagged me, which is totally awesome. I love being tagged and stuff. Makes my life simpler, and then I actually will feature it if it's relevant. We're not going to play the clip. I mean, we can.
Der Bundestag sollte schnellstmöglich einen Beschluss
but I don't understand it. So what he says, the translation is, Germany's leftist Chancellor Scholz calls on the parliament to impose a state of emergency due to the events of the last 24 hours and the statements made by the U.S. government regarding Ukraine. And so now you're seeing other countries jump to conclusions that, hey, we might be able to use the emergency powers. Now, that could mean a whole bunch of different things. That could mean emergency powers for military preparedness, emergency powers in Mark Carney's speech would be to maybe accelerate pipelines or some form of project, because he quite literally used the word projects. Or, now bear with me here, emergency powers could be used for evil, like we saw with the Emergencies Act that was illegally invoked during the convoy for the Liberals' benefit. Will the government use emergency powers to postpone an election? I don't know. But can they? Yes, they absolutely can, which is something to consider. And it's getting into some crazy territory. And speaking of crazy, you have Karina Gould, the least likely candidate to win the Liberal leadership race. I think Ruby, that random Indian woman that popped out of nowhere, has a better chance of, or is probably going to poll higher and get more votes than Karina Gould. But let's take a look, because now she's promoting how she wants to come out with UBI almost immediately after being prime minister, which is never going to happen.
We are a wealthy country. So today I'm here to announce that within 1 year of becoming Prime Minister, I would bring forward a plan to update our social safety net to really help Canadians and not just catch them when they fall, but also to enable them to bounce back even stronger than before. And so what does that look like? It means a modernized EI system that actually helps Canadians when in their time of need.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to stop her right there, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what she says. It's full of malarkey. It doesn't make any sense. This is living in utopia. We are in serious debt when we're in serious trouble. And if any politician is advocating for anything other than build more, create more jobs, bring more money to Canada, more businesses, use our resources, use oil, money, and less government handouts, cut back on social programs. If anyone's saying the opposite of that, they're going to ruin our country further. We are in so much debt, and we are obviously hurting economically. Interest rates are still high. Prices of housing is still extremely high. Life is just not affordable. And the only way to fix that is if we have a real good economic boom and we create a lot of jobs and we build a lot of houses and we just do a lot. We bring more competition to Canada, which would drive prices down. That's the only way to do that. So no more social programs, no more government handouts, no utopia, land of the kumbaya where we can have some UBI and peace be with everybody and we all get along. shit doesn't work. I'm sorry to swear, but that doesn't work. There's real threats out there, real threats, even though Trump is kind of schmoozing over Russia and China right now. There's actual real threats out there, and we are extremely vulnerable, and we're not doing well as a country. So we need to focus on ourselves, and we need to focus on making more money, getting ourselves out of debt. And that's going to take years of buckling down, which does not include UBI. Again, my personal opinion, but also a bit of a fact. I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments. And then you have the rebranding of True North Media here. I'm not sure what's going on, but this is True North's, previously known as True North. Now they've rebranded to Juno News, which is interesting. And they've interviewed Pierre Poilievre. And Pierre says that independent media should be allowed in the parliamentary press gallery, taking a bit of a American White House approach to this, which is absolutely awesome. And I 100% agree with this.
Well, there is a growing ecosystem of independent creators, independent journalists, citizen journalists that you see popping up all over social media. And so I wonder if you form government, the Parliamentary Press Gallery is like an insiders group. They don't want to give access to people who don't work for legacy media. What would your policy be around allowing access to your government or to you personally for independent media?
Absolutely. I think their independent media should be allowed on the precinct. There's no reason why it should be a small cabal of government-approved mouthpieces. It is highly undemocratic. I've always believed that. And it's made it particularly difficult for me because it means that only when I go and hold a press conference, it's just liberal media who are there to attend, and it's but practically speaking, I'm in the precinct, I'm on Parliament Hill, I have to hold a press conference to get my message out. I would love to see a scenario where every different kind of journalist from all backgrounds, of all opinions, is given a chance to report on what happens on the Hill.
So this is interesting wording because I'm not a journalist, and other channels like mine, it's not journalism. Journalism is bringing a story for the first time to light. What I do is I just watch videos, I watch the news, and then I add commentary to it. That's not journalism. That's content creation, commentary, whatever you want to call it, or just in the bracket of content creators, whatever label you want to put on it, but not journalism. So if Pierre's open to allowing, whoopsie, do I smell burnt toast? Allowing content creators or YouTubers or influencers on the Hill to ask him questions, that is something hello? Am I hitting puberty? That is something that I would very much be on board with. Or, now hear me out, Pierre, why don't you come on the channel and let's talk? I'll fly out to you, you fly out to me, it doesn't really matter. I'll fly out to you 100%, and we can sit down and talk. I'll ask you some questions, and I would gladly lend you this platform of 400 and some thousand subscribers and House of Canada to ask some honest questions and get some honest answers from you. That is something I'd be on board. But regardless, having people, content creators, just familiar personalities online and having them ask questions in person is pretty freaking cool. It's something that the White House has adopted, and the fact that Pierre wants to do that as well, I'm 100% on board with that. Speaking of on board, this might be the last time some people are boarding a plane on taxpayers' dimes. You got Mélanie Joly, Trudeau's mistress, or once upon a time, maybe perhaps rumored to be hypothetically, theoretically, could have been Justin Trudeau's mistress, is going to be traveling to France, Germany, and Belgium. Pretty interesting. The minister will be in Europe until February 18th on the taxpayer's dime, traveling to France, Germany, and Belgium to take part in conferences, meet with officials to discuss topics like geopolitical. I'm trying to mimic her, and obviously I hiccuped. Conflicts and foreign interference, and speak at the roundtable on Arctic security. I gotta say, I hate Mélanie Joly. Not just for who she is. I'm sure she's also a hateable person aside from her policies, but her actual policies, her approach to everything on camera, it's just LARPing. She's a live action role player. She's dressing up as if she's going to a Halloween costume, but that's her entire personality. She wears the World War II fatigues and she gets in front of the camera. Like, you know, that old photo with the chick who has like the arm like this and the headband, right? Like an old World War II or whatever, right? For like women power. That's kind of what her entire personality is. That's great. All the power to women, but she's LARPing. Like, there's no way she's exactly like that off camera. It's super bizarre. I don't like her. And then also everything that she says, I also don't like. And who she is off camera, I probably also wouldn't like her. Yeah, I think she's just a really shitty person altogether. And then you've got, switching over to America here, Trump is talking to Ukraine and says that he and Putin have agreed to begin negotiations on ending the war, which is a huge development. So for those that didn't catch what I said in a previous video, Trump is planning. He had a long conversation with Putin on the phone. Immediately called Zelensky, Ukraine, and is trying to mediate this. I believe that Trump is also planning on going to Moscow and also inviting Putin to the White House, which would be kind of cool. I mean, is Russia the bad guy? I don't know. Did Russia invade Ukraine? Hey, look, I'm not a history buff. I think that we should be working with other countries and having trade deals, and we could actually potentially get along, but right now we're not. So this utopia that people are thinking exists does not currently exist, but it may exist. It's just going to take a lot of work. But let's take a look here at what the White House has to say.
The president spoke to President Putin of Russia. They spoke at length, and the president released a statement following that conversation in great detail. I can also confirm that the president just recently got off the phone with President Zelensky of Ukraine. His truth is as follows. I just spoke to President Zelensky of Ukraine. The conversation went very well. He, like President Putin, wants to make peace. We discussed a variety of topics having to do with the war, but mostly the meeting that is being set up on Friday in Munich, where Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio will lead the delegation. I am hopeful that the results of that meeting will be positive. It is time to stop this ridiculous war where there has been massive and totally unnecessary death and destruction. God bless the people of Russia and Ukraine. I myself just spoke to the president about these calls, and he told me to tell all of you they were very good calls, they were very positive, and the administration is wholeheartedly committed to a peace deal to end once and for all the Russia-Ukraine war. More on that later.
That's absolutely freaking huge. And I mean, people that try to dunk on Trump saying that he's a warmonger, it's like the literal opposite. Trump is trying to heal the world, and it's working. I mean, we're less than 30 days into him being president again, and it's really working, especially when you combine it with this recipe right here. Russian President Putin invites Xi Jinping and Donald Trump to attend Russia's victory parade on May 9th in Moscow. And that would be absolutely friggin' insane to see three world leaders getting together and hopefully coming around to some form of a mediation where all countries can get along and that we don't have this ongoing conflict. And now we got to take a look at what's going on with this, the big one, because Trump threatened these retaliatory tariffs or reciprocal tariffs to the retaliatory tariffs to the original tariffs. Trump laid tariffs, other countries said we're going to retaliate, and now Trump is doing reciprocal stuff. So what does that look like? What's this big one? Let's take a look at that right now.
We think the European Union is wonderful. We all love Europe, love the countries in Europe, but European Union has been absolutely brutal on trade. Canada has been very bad to us on trade, but now Canada is going to have to start paying up. And Canada's been tough on the military because they have a very low military cost. They think we're going to, protect them with our military, which is unfair. So Canada is going to be a very interesting situation because, we just don't need their product. And yet they survive off the fact that we do 95% of what they do. And Canada is just absolutely, I say it, and sometimes people smile and sometimes they say great idea, but Canada, their taxes would come down greatly, their security would go up greatly. Amazing things happen to Canada, and really Canada in this particular, why would we pay $200 billion a year in subsidies to Canada when they're not a state? You do that for a state, but you don't do that for somebody else's country. So I think Canada is going to be a very serious contender to be our 51st state.
Mr. President, how are negotiations going with Canada? There was obviously a delay in implementing those tariffs.
I spoke to Governor Trudeau on numerous occasions, and we'll see what happens. But it just sets up so good for them. Look, the people would pay much less tax than they're paying right now. They'd have perfect military protection. They don't have any military protection because and you take a look at what's going on out there. You have Russian ships, you have China ships, you have Chinese ships, you have a lot of ships out there, and people are in danger. This is a different world today. It's a different world. They need our protection, yes.
You mentioned Elon Musk and the efforts that he's undertaking with your authority. You granted him new authority this week. Will he secure any new government contracts while he is working on Doge?
No, not if there's a conflict. If there's no conflict, I guess what difference does it make? But we won't let him do anything having to do with the conflict.
Are you personally checking to make sure there's no conflicts of interest?
Yeah, I am.
He answers to you.
Sure, he does. First of all, he wouldn't do it, and second of all, we're not going to let him do anything with a conflict of interest.
Mr. President, your negotiations with the EU there's discussions ongoing already. How quickly do you expect that you'll hear back from them about any of these other measures? I can't tell you. Yeah, the EU's been very nasty. It's just been they haven't treated us properly. Look, we were great to them on NATO. Essentially, it's a similar group of countries. When I came in my first term, I raised their fees. I mean, they were not paying. We were paying for, in my opinion, almost all of NATO. And now, I had the bad moment with the press where the press said, well, does this mean you won't protect them? And I said, I won't protect them if they're not paying. But because I said that, the Secretary General, as you know, said it was the greatest thing he's ever seen because the money came pouring in. But they don't treat us right on trade. They don't treat us right on the military either. I mean, if you look at Ukraine, we're in for probably $200 billion more than Europe. Why are we in for more than Europe? We're in for more than Europe. I mean, think of it, or NATO. I mean, let's call it NATO because Canada's in. By the way, Canada is just about the lowest payer. Also, they shouldn't be. They are just about the lowest payer in NATO, in addition to everything else. So Canada's really been taken advantage of. And if they had to pay just something modestly fair, they wouldn't be able to succeed as a country. And that's why I feel they have to become a state. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is it your expectation that partners will offer major concessions and that you actually don't end up applying those tariffs?
No, I think that a lot of them will stay the same, and whatever they pay, I'll pay. I mean, we'll have a lot of them stay the same. I think some. Look, I heard as an example, EU lowered their tax on cars down to the exact same amount that they were much higher. They were approximately 5 times higher, and they lowered them down to the exact tax that we're charging. That took place like yesterday or the day before. Is that a correct statement? I think so, yeah.
Do you expect any exemptions or waivers?
I don't expect that, no. This is a simple system. I mean, there wouldn't be any. And in the case of Apple, I gave them a waiver, an exemption in my first term because Samsung was in South Korea, and Samsung didn't have to pay the tax because it was a tax on China, and Apple makes a lot of their product in China. So I did that because it wouldn't have been fair. But now this applies to everybody across the board. This is a much simpler way of doing it, much better way.
Did you, Mr. President, you had that major call yesterday with President Putin of Russia. President Zelensky responded today basically saying any agreements they won't accept unless they're made with Ukraine. Will Ukraine have a seat at that table for those negotiations?
Of course they would. I mean, they're part of it. We would have Ukraine, and we'd have Russia, and we'll have other people involved too. A lot of people, a lot of forks in the. A lot of forks in this game. I'll tell you what, this is a very interesting situation, but the Ukraine war has to end. The young people are being killed at levels that nobody's seen since World War II, and it's a ridiculous war, and it has to end. We had a good talk with President Putin. I had a good talk with President Zelensky, very good talk. And somebody said, oh, I should have called Zelensky first. I don't think so. I mean, we have to find out whether or not Russia wants to make a deal. I know that Zelensky wants to make a deal because he told me that. But I now know that Russia wants to make a deal.
So there you have it. Lots of moving parts. Obviously not necessarily the greatest news for Canada. But again, Canada's focus in this should be just fix everything and start to try and play nicely with America, or we're going to get the crap end of that stick. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Drop a like on this video and subscribe. It's absolutely free and I would really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys in another one. Bye for now.